And I'm a member of the Oregon Association of Mortgage Professionals, and I was at a meeting not too long ago, and there was Tami talking about all of this. And I'm like, oh man, that's the perfect person. You know, gosh, I wonder if she'll do it. I've already been turned down twice, right? Can you imagine being turned down to come talk to all of you? I was turned down, and so once I heard Tami speak, I knew that you'd love her just as much. So, Tami, it's yours.
First off, I want to thank Western Title for putting this on today, and then particularly Larry for organizing it and getting everybody together. When we see my PowerPoint, I'm really going to thank Larry because he did it for me. He's taking me today a little bit out of my comfort zone and saying, you know, that we're not going to ask questions as we go through the process. Those of you that have heard me talk before, you know I'm sort of, everything's free game and you can ask whatever you want, but I'm going to get through my information and then we can have questions at the end. So thus I had to do a PowerPoint. So I learn something new every day, imagine that. I am surprised to hear that you got turned down. I can't imagine lawyers who don't want to talk, but... Okay, you know, let's start with just some basics. Let's see. Put on here negotiating a short sale. Why do you need to know, and why you need to know the consequences of a foreclosure? And this is, as I've been talking to groups, it's one of the things that I've really realized that as realtors in particular, and as sellers of property when it's distressed, they really have to understand what the consequences of the wheels coming off the bus are going to be in order to know what's going to happen in a short sale and some things that they need to watch out for. I'm going to talk later about the elephants in the room that you as realtors need to talk to your sellers about because there's a couple of them out there, and they're just going to be really important for you to talk to. As I'm hearing myself, I also want to apologize. I've got my kids' cold, as I've said before. I love them, but I don't love their colds. So let's talk about foreclosures. There are, in Oregon, two different types of foreclosures. There can be a judicial foreclosure or a non-judicial foreclosure. When you hear non-judicial foreclosure, I too will interchange it with the term trustee's foreclosure or trustee's sale. It's the same process. But it's important to recognize that there are two different types of foreclosures in the state of Oregon. One is through our court system, and the other is through the county clerk's office. It's premised on a notice to the borrowers, and then it's conducted by an outside entity that never goes to court. In Oregon, there are no deficiency rights on a primary residence that is foreclosed either in the court system judicially or non-judicially through the trustee's sale process. If it is not the borrower's primary residence, and here's going to be a key difference between the legal context of primary residence, and you'll hear Steve talk about primary residence in terms of tax, is it's the primary residence at the time the foreclosure is commenced. It's a very narrow definition, so a loan could have been taken out as investment property, but if the borrower is living in it at the time the foreclosure starts, that qualifies as a primary residence. Or vice versa, if they took out the loan as a primary residence and are not living in it at the time the foreclosure starts, it is not going to be a primary residence for purpose of looking at the anti-deficiency rules. I'm actually going to forward in the slide because that's really what we're talking about now is Oregon's anti-deficiency rules, including some of the recent changes. So no deficiency rights for a lender in either a judicial or a non-judicial context. It sounds really broad when I say this, but if a lender chooses to use the judicial process for a commercial loan or an investment property loan, even if it's residential property, they have deficiency rights. So, you know, often at this point a lot of people wonder, well, why don't we see a lot of foreclosure actions in the court system? And it's really because we don't. It's because the system for non-judicial foreclosures is a much more efficient system for lenders to use. The other component is that most of the foreclosures that we're seeing right now are residential properties. And it has been an extremely rare situation that a lender will use the judicial foreclosure process on residential property, even if it's not the borrower's primary residence. So usually that process is handled through the non-judicial routes, and that's the deficiency rules that are going to apply. But it's important to know that there are times that a lender, even on residential property, will choose to use the judicial process, and if they do, and if it's not their primary residence, there's going to be some deficiency rights following the sale.